Foreign missionaries are necessary for world evangelism.
Foreign missionaries are often hurtful to their own cause.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you, Mark, and friends, I too would like to welcome you to another edition of the American Religious Town Hall meeting. I'm glad that you were with us today. We hope that you've invited some of your friends to join us. For our regular viewers, you might notice a little bit of a change regarding our set here today. We hope you like that. We do read your mail and listen to you very carefully. But before we get started with today's topic, I'd like you to meet our guests, our panelists today. We'll begin with Bishop Olson to my right.
My name is Bishop Michael Olson, and I am the Roman Catholic Bishop of the Diocese of Fort Worth.
I'm Jordan Offsire, a rabbi in retirement living in the Palm Springs area and teaching and conducting life cycle events within the community.
Hi, I'm Tom Plumley. I'm the senior minister of First Christian Church in downtown Fort Worth, Texas.
Hello, my name is Mel Robeck. I'm professor of church history and ecumenics at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California, and I'm an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God.
Hi, I'm Carl Troval. I'm Dean of the College of Liberal Arts at Concordia University in Austin, Texas, which is affiliated with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
Hello, my name is Alan Lane. I'm pastor of Fort Graham Baptist Church in the lovely Lake Whitney area, Central Texas.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for joining us again today for this next program. It's going to be an interesting one. From what I can tell, has to do with missions and missionaries, because much of the history of the Christian church is closely associated with foreign missionary work, and pioneer missionaries are often seen and honored as heroes of the faith. This is quite understandable in view of the Great Commission to make disciples of all nations and the very last words of Jesus recorded in Acts chapter 1, where he said, "You will be my witnesses to the ends of the earth." The 19th and 20th centuries were great missionary centuries for Western European and North American Christianity, to the extent that now the numerical strength of Christianity has shifted to parts of the Third World. In the 20th century, voices were, however, increasingly raised, calling into question the whole missionary enterprise, even suggesting it was a folly. As it was popular in some places a few decades ago to talk about the, quote, ugly American, it was promoted in places to think about the ugly missionary. An ecumenical conference held in South America called for a total moratorium on missionary work. American missionaries were accused of being tools of the colonial power, agents of discrimination, enemies of or totally insensitive to ancient cultures. However, recent research by Robert Woodbury provides evidence that areas in Africa where Protestant missionaries had a significant presence are on the average economically, health-wise, and educationally, not least for women, better developed for liberal democracy and for less corruption than other areas. Today, I would like our panelists to consider at least these three questions with regard to today's topic. First, have foreign missionaries been a positive force for democratization? Second, were 19th century foreign missionaries a folly? And in the 20th century, not much better? And then finally, did missionaries change history for better or for worse? Let's return now to those who made our opening statements, and for that we go back to Dr. Lane. Welcome again, Dr. Lane. Glad you're here. If you could please elaborate on the comment you started the program with today.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much, Pastor Lutz. In preparation for this program, I went to my library and looked at the number of books that I have that study missions. And in just a brief look at the books I have in my library, I saw books using different terminology in different ways. This has been a particular topic in the last 30 years has been so studied and studied more. I'm not sure that's been helpful. Sometimes it's called evangelism, sometimes it's called evangelization, sometimes it's called mission, sometimes it's called missional work. All kinds of I think, hyper study almost. It's very simple in my mind. We were given a mandate by Jesus, and He, in that mandate, used a progressive concept. It's used with a term now that's not very, very highly thought of being foreign missions. But it simply captures a simple process. Jesus said, "You will be my witnesses, my ambassadors, beginning here where you are in Jerusalem. Then in the next region close by, Judea. Then in the next country, Samaria. And ultimately leading you to the ends of the earth." And those who have sensed the call to missions, like I have, I first began as a missionary into Central and South America before I went into pastoring. The call is urgent and it's deep. Now, to be sure, there are some failings we're going to talk about here. I'll admit many of those. There's some naivete that's been involved in missionaries going places carrying all of their culture with them, thinking that was part of the gospel message. But in a very real sense, it has been the means by which the gospel message has been shared across the world. Even in our own country here in America, watching the fires of revival back in the mid-19th century, opening churches throughout the West, many times very small churches, but then preparing for the growth that was to come and have incredible impact on the culture and the people that would eventually migrate there. Along with it have come the ancillary benefits of educational growth, medical advances, and I think, too, cultural changes that have faced the challenges that were encountered when the gospel was introduced into new cultures. It's what Jesus asked us to do, and therefore we must do it, even if we do it poorly in some occasions, but overall it is necessary.
Thank you, Dr. Lane. Let's come across the table to Reverend Plumley. Welcome again, Reverend Plumley. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I'm not sure I disagree with anything that Alan said, particularly the part where he said that it's necessary. It's a part of what we're called to do. My addition to the conversation, however, would be that it's often done poorly, and throughout history it has tended to carry along with it some baggage that has been very hurtful, often causing conflict, and then aiming the conflict in order to deflect it from the Christian population that it was trying to build, directed the conflict elsewhere at other people, like, say, for instance, Jews or other folks that were kind of outsiders in whatever community it was. I think that the problem has usually been when the missionary, him or herself, has been unable to distinguish their religion from the culture in which they grew up with that religion, or the culture in which they learned that religion. And therefore, when they came into the new area of the world with a different culture, were destructive of the culture in order to bring in the religious word, in order to bring in the faith that they were trying to bring in. Think of just an anecdote. Missionary comes in and tells the chief of a particular African tribe that it's against God's law to have more than one wife, and the chief wants to be baptized because he sees certain advantages to that. So the missionary says, in order to be baptized, you got to get rid of, you have to divorce all but one of your wives. and the missionary doesn't realize that in that culture, a divorced woman is worse than a dead one. A divorced woman is just totally outside, unable to take care of herself, and so the chief goes and kills all but one of his wives, and then presents himself to be baptized. That sort of insensitivity to the whole culture in which one immerses oneself as a missionary has often caused problems. And then I think it just goes without saying that missionaries have often been complicit with and a tool of empire building.
Thank you very much. We've raised some interesting issues for discussion here today. And Dr. Robeck, I'm wondering what you're thinking. Your organization, your church has been involved with missions for quite some time. What is your take on this whole idea of contextualization and missionaries and what we're talking about today?
I think missionary work is very important, although over time, missionary work has changed. If you really stop and think about how missions came to the Western Hemisphere, for instance, you'll find that on every ship there were soldiers and there were priests. And so, some people will argue that the gospel came also with guns. And there's some truth to that. We also have to recognize that some missionaries have made enormous errors in judgment and so forth. Cultural anthropologists tell us that we've taken away some of these ancient cultures. I want to say I think that's good in some respects. In many respects, I would say. We don't have foot binding of young girls. We don't have infanticide of young girls in many cases as a result of that. We don't have widows being burned on the pyres when their husbands die in India. We don't have as much genital mutilation in Africa as we once did. And those can all be looked at as missionary contributions. To say nothing of the whole question of literacy, reducing oral traditions and languages to written languages, which enable people to read and to get education. Many of the schools around the world, hospitals around the world, social programs around the world were established first by missionaries. But I do agree that cultural imperialism has been a downside on many missionaries, especially I would say in the 19th century. I think in the 20th century, a lot of mission organizations and churches got a handle on that in a much better way. And in the 21st century, I wouldn't want to rule that out as being a missionary century at all, though in terms of missions, what we're finding is a lot of missionaries from the so-called two-thirds world, those who have been converted through missionary activities of the 19th and 20th centuries, are now showing up in the Western Hemisphere and in the Northern Hemisphere as missions to people who used to have the gospel but have often forgotten what that's about. So I think it's a plus and a minus. And I really liked Bob Woodbury's study. He's a sociologist of religion, I think, at Baylor University. And I've known Bob for a lot of years, and his father, and he grew up in the mission field. His father was a missionary in largely Muslim countries. And, his dad currently is working with the U.S. Department of State and with the Iranian officials in the whole nuclear disarmament question. And that really comes directly out of the missionary concern that they have for peace and justice and so forth. And instilling ethics in the midst of these really deeply political and difficult questions. And what Bob has demonstrated is that wherever, especially Protestant and evangelical missionaries went, they set up systems where people were self-propagating and self-governing and self-supporting, and they brought people into leadership, and women have received a much higher part of society than they would otherwise.
Well, thank you, Dr. Robeck. Your insight's been very helpful, as have the other comments so far. Let's come across the table to Bishop Olson. And of course, the Catholic Church has been involved with evangelization for many, many years, hundreds, if not at least a couple of thousand. What is your position on this particular subject?
Well, I think that it's all of the critiques of something like missionary work, evangelization that we've heard are very valid. I think especially the 19th century saw a lot of coercion and a misuse of religion by nationalist governments to build an empire, especially the 19th century period. And I think we have to acknowledge that. And with also all of the good that comes with missionary efforts, which have also been brought about. I think really a good evaluation of evangelization for a Catholic really has to be to see Jesus as the first evangelizer, and that we do works of mercy not to make other people Catholic, but because we are. We teach not because they're Catholic or we're going to make them Catholic, but because we are. And that there's service beyond just simply doctrinal message that has to be performed, works to the poor, works to those who otherwise are oppressed, works of instructing the ignorant, so for the sake of participation in the society that's more freely done. And I think that has to be sort of an examination of conscience done by anyone engaged in evangelization.
Well, thank you very much, and we're glad you're here today as well. We haven't heard yet from Rabbi. Rabbi Offsire, your position on this, although we're having kind of a Protestant discussion here, we'd love to hear your perspective on this issue of evangelization.
My perspective is very, very different. I wanted to hear as fully as I could the perspective of my friends representing Christianity. The Jewish perspective is really as follows, to be summed up briefly. The underlying view toward missionaries and evangelization is very, very different in Judaism. And it is because Christianity believes, traditional Christianity, that there is no salvation without accepting Jesus as the Christ. And therefore, there is an obligation to go out and to seek others becoming part of the Christian community. Judaism believes differently. The Hebrew is important. Chasidei umot ha'olam ein lahem chelek ba'olam, yesh lahem chelek ba'olam haba. The Jewish view is that the righteous of all the world have a place in the world to come. And that's the energizing perspective of Judaism, that salvation is available to every person of goodness if he or she fulfills that which is good in the most universal sense. That is, that which can be fulfilled by every human being, and goodness defined as you would want everyone else in the same situation to do the same thing. My definition of goodness. And so therefore, Judaism doesn't feel that it is something that we should do to evangelize, since the possibility of salvation is open to everyone. What we do believe is that we need to live according to the traditions that we are a part of, and to respect and to reinforce the traditions of those who believe in the possibility of goodness and salvation for every person.
Thank you very much. Let's come over to Dr. Troval. Welcome, Dr. Troval, and your position?
My position, first of all, I've loved actually everything you've all said, because I've learned a lot just sitting here, and I appreciate that. And as I was listening, I thought, well, how would I approach this? And I guess I have to. It's almost very personal to me, because I was originally started my ministry on the border between in Laredo, working in Spanish and English, trying essentially as a missionary. And my only motive really was, I think, as I learned, not to follow the command of Christ, go into all the world, but the second piece was, you know, missionary work is just one beggar telling another beggar where the food is, that we're all beggars, and God bestows His bounty, and it's why would I not want to share the bounty with others? So it's that simple impulse. But the odd thing is that as I went down there with all this naivete and all the training in the world doesn't beat it out of you, the one thing I realized, and perhaps why I ended up getting a PhD in ethics, is because I had to completely revamp my whole worldview, because I thought I was coming with something, and I really became realizing I don't know if I have a whole lot to give. I think maybe someone's got a lot more to give me. I came to understand deep structures of injustice that I was completely blind to. I came to understand a whole new culture, a whole new people, of which I all of a sudden began to say, I think I need to listen more than I need to speak. And in my own person, I see how this works on a macro level for a church. They walk into a culture thinking they're going to transform it, and in some ways they do. The other thing is that you always have buried, you mentioned the distinction between culture and religion. It's a great distinction. The problem is that the older I've gotten is that I don't think you can separate it. I mean, when we use language like liberal democracy, and this is a good thing, wait, liberal democracy has nothing to do with Christianity, right? So why is it somehow inherently good that liberal democracy, I think you can say liberal democracy is good, maybe perhaps on other stamps. Okay, sorry, I'll just getting excited.
Thank you. That's great. But
I see the moderator slowing me down.
But you know what? We are actually out of time for this segment. If you can believe that, it went by so quickly. But we will come back for the closing statements in just a few moments. In the meantime, Mark has a very important message for you. We'll be back in just a moment.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Thank you, Mark, and welcome back. I do look forward to hearing from you, and I hope to do so this week. And don't forget to visit our website where we have archived programs I think you might be interested in viewing. Now let's hear from our panelists with regard to their closing statements. We'll begin with Bishop Olson.
I think coming out of the Catholic tradition, I would say that missionary activity, evangelization, is essential to the life of a Catholic. That being said, it requires very much the virtue of humility, and that the means of delivering the message of the gospel really must match the substance of the gospel, and that the more that we share the gospel that we have received, the more that we do receive it.
And now, Reverend Plumley.
Thank you. As I look at the example of Jesus himself, I can think of no examples where he went in with a sword or with a gun or with any sort of ill intention toward anyone, but simply as one trying to do good and to be the best person that God had made him to be. I think that often. The old adage, one bad apple spoils the whole barrel. It doesn't take but one or two instances of missionaries being bad apples that the whole enterprise gets looked askance at by the rest of the world.
And thank you. Dr. Trovall, you're next, please.
I think that the virtue of humility is a very profound virtue in this activity of sharing with others your faith, your beliefs about God, the mandate of Christ to share his love and forgiveness with the world. And I think my always concern is just to be aware of how much one brings in from one's own culture as you move into another culture, because you bring in a lot more than you're aware of.
And thank you very much, Dr. Trovall. Across from you is Dr. Lane. Alan, your closing statement, please.
Jesus said to all those who follow him, "You are my witnesses." But all of us do well to remember that we're carrying the beautiful gospel of Christ. We're presenting it to the precious souls of men and women who may believe, and we're doing so to honor the holy reputation of God who sent us. That's the approach we must take. Lord, help us not to violate any of those three wonderful gifts.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Robeck.
In 1998, I was privileged to be in a meeting in Harare, Zimbabwe, in which on one day, Robert Mugabe, the controversial president of Zimbabwe, spoke. and addressed a Christian body. And the next day, Nelson Mandela, retired from South Africa's presidency, also spoke. Both of them had been educated in Christian institutions. Both of them had grown up in societies that were allegedly Christian. And yet both of them had suffered under apartheid, which was obviously something churches supported, along with missionaries over time. But the attitudes of these two men to the kind of training that they got and how it impacted them is like night and day. With Robert Mugabe taking back land and putting whites in enormous fear, Nelson Mandela saying, we have to work together to build a new nation, and we have to build trust and give grace. And I think it's important to understand that missionaries have done some wonderful things. They have also done some terrible things in the name of Christianity, and it's very sad. I also think that missions is changing quite significantly to much more in support of local and indigenous leadership.
Thank you, Dr. Robeck. And now, Rabbi Offsire, your summary, please.
Thank you. I would like to add that Judaism is open to those who wish to become Jewish. Judaism accepts converts. Judaism simply asks that the convert learn enough to be able to make a good choice, a knowledgeable choice in becoming Jewish. We believe in perhaps transformations that are very short, but we don't believe in change of a basic nature that happens immediately. And so we require a process of study, and we welcome those who wish to become part of us, and yet we recognize that there is truthfulness in the religion of others, and they should feel free to live as they choose to live. And we need to encourage that as much as we can.
Well, thank you very much, Rabbi. And to all of the gentlemen here today, I extend my great appreciation for your contribution. This has been a very enlightening experience. And we hope that you at home, as you have watched either on television or by way of the internet, have been blessed and have been enlightened by what we've discussed here today. Now, the charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And now, friends, until next week at the same time and over this very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.